hello again, everyone. This week on examining whatever games I feel like examining, we are going to be examining Taiji. So this probably, if you're watching this video series, there's probably like a 90% chance that you have already heard of Taiji and maybe have already even played it, even though it's a niche game. But if you have not, you really deserve to know about it because this is like explicitly like a Witness fan game, where just like in the Witness, you're on this island, you go around, you solve puzzles, you learn the meaning of like mysterious symbols, and then you are able to unlock new areas and go around on this like beautiful decorative island. This game is feels especially close to my heart, not just because I'm a Witness super fan, but because the guy who made it is
Also Witness
anyone.
super fan.
Yes, anyone who makes a fan game of a Jonathan Blow product is near and dear to my heart. If you've been watching my Braid More Now Than Ever videos, indeed, this guy Matthew Van de Vander he also has a video series analyzing Braid called Braid and Brews, and he has also videos about the Witness. So if you like that, yeah, I'm sure I'll put these in the video description, and you can check those out. But he made this whole game, Taiji, in the however many years it's been since the Witness came out, and yeah, I'm gonna go through. We're not gonna do a full examining the Witness style rigmarole of like talking about the ins and outs of every area, but I'm just gonna kind of I've played the whole game. I loved it. So we're just gonna go through and talk about like the overall themes of the game and just some little details that I liked about it and stuff like that. But of course, that'll involve a little bit of spoilery type stuff. So if you haven't played this game, definitely get out there, buy yourself a copy of Taiji right now. You're gonna have a great time, and then you can come back and watch this video later. I mean, so the name Taiji is, as we'll talk about later at length, is refers to like duality and like the Yin-Yang symbol. It's a term from Chinese philosophy, a term from Taoism, and the game is all about this like duality and opposites and flipping of things, and you see that in the puzzles and of course throughout the world, because just like the Witness is trying to have multiple layers of things going on. Now it does have less thematic depth than the Witness in the sense that like there's not audio logs all around the island, and in a lot of ways it's constrained by the fact that it's paying homage to the Witness, and so it's like there's like these beautiful like pink tree area, with all these like nice puzzles and stuff, and it's like, oh, why are the trees pink? Why are there pink trees in the game? And it's like, well, it's because there's pink trees in the Witness, and and this is like referencing that. So the fact that it's like a fan game means that there's a lot of the elements are like in there, like everything has been given its own like, kind of like unique Taiji twist compared to how things work in the Witness. But not all of the twists can like sit well together. So there's just, that's just kind of an inevitable part of like making something that's so heavily inspired by a favorite game, and something that I also experience with Braid More Now Than Ever. Yeah. So there's also, I think, like if you watch Matthew's videos analyzing Braid and the Witness, they're not like mine that are all about the story and I'm like, who is the princess and stuff like that. He opens up one of his Braid and Brew videos by being like, yeah, so like I'm one of those guys who just ran past the books in Braid at the beginning, and I'm really more into the gameplay, so that's what we're gonna be looking at. So they're more about game design, and they're about the individual kind of details of the puzzle mechanics, and so I think you see that reflected here in Taiji, which does a really wonderful job of kind of capturing that like
Thoughtfulness and
yeah, I mean it has the kind of like thoughtfulness and like relaxation that the island of the witness has, which is kind of amazing. I wouldn't have expected that to translate into 2D very well, but it's like very relaxing and kind of enjoyable to explore and unlock new areas. And it also just does a great job with the puzzles. Like it just has really nice mechanics, and it's really fun to like learn all of these crazy symbols, all over again, just like we remember from the Witness Island. So the game is less thematically intense than the Witness, but it picks up on a crucial fact, which is that the witness itself is ultimately about duality, as I've been talking about ad nauseum in those videos, and that the black and white tiles that you see in the witness, they get that Heisenberg quote about maintaining the tension between the two views, that is some of the most important symbolism of the witness, and Taiji obviously picks up on that. And the witness itself has basically like a yin-yang symbol right at the top of the mountain, symbolizing like the unification of opposites. And we can put a photo of that in here. So there's just like, that's like a very core theme in the witness, is this like duality, the impossibility of reconciling these two things, like they must be one thing and yet they're separate. The witness, of course, has a specific duality in mind when it's saying all this. It's like the scientific worldview versus the kind of first-person introspective ways of learning about the world and kind of connecting to existence. Versus Taiji, just sort of like, dude, duality, like how, there's like two and there's one, so it kind of takes that duality theme and it's just applying it in many different contexts, including in many different game design contexts, which are like very delightful to see all of the places that it goes. And there's also, I was just thinking, sitting down to make this video, that it's a very kind of mature and thought through adaptation of the themes of the game. Like it fits well with the fact that this is a 2D game, because in The Witness, there's so much is about the 3D experience of like, and there's all this like 3D versus 2D stuff, like the environmental puzzles. It's like, whoa, this was a 3D shape, but now it comes into alignment and it's the shape that's like, visible on your screen, and it's reminding you of your sensory experience and your consciousness. So The Witness has all these 2D 3D contrasts about this like unreachable gap, like the Kusa's wall of paradise between these two like different modes of seeing the world. Like how do we get between them? And the 3D and 2D are such different like modes of perception, that that works well as kind of fundamental metaphor in The Witness. Versus Taiji as a 2D game, it kind of has the opposite problem. Like, for instance, walk around to the side cliff there. Like, it's hard to even tell. This is supposed to be like a lake that's way down in in like a pool or something. But because it's a 2D game, it's hard to even sort out foreground from background. They have to use shading tricks and, the hanging vines. And there's all these cues. And even then, it's kind of weird and confusing. Like that elevator. Like, I literally didn't realize this before today, but like that's not going towards the screen, it's like going down. That's supposed to be like getting lowered down a pulley. I always thought it was like coming out on a rail, because it's just perspective.
Yeah. Unlike this zone, which is actually,
yeah, that's supposed to be actually flat. So it's like it's very limiting to have.
It's deliberately playing with that, I think.
Yes,
it is.
But I mean, it just runs into that problem constantly. And but that plays into the themes of this game, which are, so foreground background is a huge theme here, because you're, instead of drawing lines like you do in The Witness, you're clicking on these tiles and you're kind of flipping these tiles over between black and white. You can go into one of these puzzles and demonstrate. So you have this kind of symmetry where you can enable and disable things, and the game never draws a distinction. It's not like the white tiles are on and the black ones are off. I mean, sort of, but there's always you can solve many of the puzzles by like inverting all, like it's it's the same whether you have the puzzle be pure white or or pure black, right? So let me take this one and just invert it, and that'll also complete. Um, so in 2D you have this kind of confusion about perspective and about foreground and background, but that also fits really well with Taiji's themes of kind of like the intermingling of these dualities. Like you don't know what's the subject and what's the object, and there's always things are kind of like shifting and reversing all the time. Um, so it's sort of a vaguer theme because it's not like making all these detailed specific points about like here's this area that's all about this specific type of science or like this like dedicated to these exact themes like in fact that the areas are kind of theme. I don't know, I haven't figured out the theme of some of the areas yet, but so it's more just kind of about overall duality and it's more about the game mechanics, but it's still like a just like a very powerful kind of like artistic motif, and like philosophical theme. So we'll take a moment to talk about the puzzle design in this game. So the greatest thing about Taiji is it does a great job of introducing new mechanics wordlessly through simple puzzles that build up, just like all of your favorite logic areas in the Witness. It's new stuff because instead of drawing lines, you're like flipping the tiles, and this changes the nature of the puzzles pretty significantly. Like in the Witness, in theory, if you get really stuck, you can always like kind of break out pen and paper and be like, okay, there has to be a corner here because like because of these pieces. But because you're drawing a line, it's kind of hard to think like that, and so that favors a more holistic like you just kind of stare at it and consider the different constraints, and then you're like, oh, I draw it this way. And the Witness often has these kind of clever puzzle moments where you're drawing the line one way and then you have almost the same exact layout, but you have to draw it another way. And Taiji pulls many of those same tricks, but because you're flipping the tiles instead of drawing a line, it's more kind of Sudokuable. Like you can kind of work piece by piece. Some of these puzzles get to have like very large number, like it'll be like 10 by 10 tiles, so you'll have like 100 elements on screen that you have to color in properly, and the way you do that of course is by breaking it down into components, and trying to like let's visit some of these big screens that have like a bunch of elements on them, and you can often like reason about little corners of it, which gives a feeling of it feels like Sudoku when you're able to fill in the numbers, and then that carries over and has implications for other parts of the map. It also feels like Go a lot, because you run into kind of similar situations just in terms of adjacency on this square grid, in like John Conway's Game of Life. So that creates a very different vibe. It's like less kind of like, it means that it's a little less clear what some of the puzzles are about when they become very large. It's kind of just like, yeah, there's just a bunch of sweet elements in here and I'm just like doing some puzzles, rather than each panel like having a specific message that it's trying to communicate, like how the panels in the Witness have. But it also means that they can kind of like get harder, and you can have more combinations and things, and yet still have like that flow of, it's not like a fake difficulty of like, oh, there's just way too much stuff in here, or like they skipped some steps when explaining this. So I don't know. So I really appreciate, like, if you're like playing the challenge levels in the Witness in the caves, and you're like, yeah, I can do this, bring it on, then you will appreciate Taiji because slowly work through some of the biggest kind of puzzle surfaces on that the game provides. Yeah, like that's just preposterous, but you can reason through it, and you learn all of these techniques for reasoning through it, so it really gives it quite a different feel from the Witness. while still doing that, like introducing the puzzle mechanics and having the mechanics from different areas of the island be kind of cross compatible with each other. Um, it also mirrors. We'll talk about this more later, but it mirrors The Witness in that some of there's like logic puzzles, and then there's puzzles that are based on environmental cues. And really, the logic puzzles really shine in this game because they can kind of go like bigger than the ones in The Witness, although they're less clear in some way. Um, but the environmental puzzles are like a little bit on tougher ground because they're just in this 2D game. It's like kind of harder to hide the
the
like
clues.
Swivel
the camera.
Yeah. It's less exploration focused.
Yeah, but these are some really fine logic puzzles up here.
Yeah, and also like The Witness, large parts of the game are optional, so you only need, I don't know how many, but you only need a subset of the areas to unlock like the main end content of the game. And there's all these sort of like hardcore side puzzles, which are just optional stuff. So
completely.
that makes it nice.
Yeah.
There's so the game just really does a great job of capturing the sort of puzzling attitude of The Witness. Another thing that I was pretty surprised by is that it also kind of captures the feel of exploring the world and like that sort of relaxed contemplative atmosphere and having the tone of like surrealness. I mean, it's a little bit, there's less realism in Taiji. I mean, like it's literally floating islands in a void rather than just on an ocean. But I don't know, it has that same like the flow of the different areas and just like all the little paths and things. I'm kind of amazed that works as well as it does in 2D as opposed to 3D. Oh, speaking of 2D and 3D, let's just go over to that tree right there. So this is like one of the, I don't know, just like examples of beautiful art. Like I love like how the grass and the trees and the water, it's imitating The Witness and Braid and other games, how it's trying to have this like living image even when the camera is still. You have all this motion and like the reflections in the water. So I really appreciate that, and I mean it feels like that must have been hard to do, right? Because you got to figure out how to animate or program all those little variations. But I don't know, that gives it really nice, and the music in the game is nice. This tree, so this is like a great homage to a couple of things in The Witness. First of all, you have the pink trees, and then second, you have like all of this reflection activity going on. So it's really connecting to The Witness's interest in like the geometry of reflections and symmetry and things. So you of course have the reflection of the tree in the water, where you can see the undersides of the branches and everything, which is like puzzle relevant, of course. But you also have the shadow of the tree being projected by sunlight onto the water there. So I don't know, just like a simple image, but like really beautiful to have that in 2D, because of course like it's not real. There's no real shadows and there's no real reflection. It's all just human artwork. But it's a nod to that idea, and like seeing that rendered in, I don't know, in pixel art, it just seems like really beautiful when you know that it's kind of referencing those things that The Witness is doing in 3D, and like honoring those things even though it's in a 2D game. So there's also, of course, there's a lot of ways in which Taiji is not imitating The Witness, or just it has to be different from it. So The Witness is like, as a result of being this first-person exploration game, it's about realism. It's like a simulation of real life almost. I mean, all first-person games are like this, and we kind of take it for granted. But The Witness, like the thing where you pause the game and you get the after image as if you've closed your eyes. There's all these things in The Witness that are trying to remind you, like it's like trying to remind you that this is a sort of simplified version of your real sensory experience in the real world. Versus in Taiji, it's a 2D game, you're watching this little character move around. It's much more like, this is a painting, you're like looking at this artwork. There's music playing, right? Music never plays in The Witness. I think there's some funny Joe Blow quote where he talks about like, he's like, well, there's not music in real life, so we don't have music playing in the background in The Witness, But of course, Braid, which was also like living painting, had music like constantly playing in order to be able to do the time stuff. And Taiji here also has like really nice kind of relaxing music going in the background. Yeah, so let's get into all that yin yang symbolism. So we can put these images up on screen. Obviously, everyone has seen the classic yin yang symbol. This is properly known apparently as a Taiji 2, which is a diagram of Taiji, and Taiji is a philosophical idea of this like primordial duality that generates the universe. And there's lots of these like diagrams. There's the famous one of the yin yang, but there's all these kind of like other variants and things that were popular at different points in time within Taoism as like expressions of this fundamental principle. So Chinese philosophy back in the day was dealing with the same sorts of questions of like monism and dualism that any metaphysician worth their salt runs into, where it's like, well, it seems like everything has to be unified. Like there has to be some sense in which all the things in the universe share some essence, because otherwise how would we have any contact with them, right? Like if there was some object that didn't have anything in common with me, then like how would the light even bounce off it and then enter my eyes? There must be some shared properties. And it seems like at the beginning of time or at the beginning of creation, like everything must have been all one. It must have come from one source. There must be some similarity that like underpins the existence of all things and kind of unifies it, because I have this unified conscious experience. And it just seems like there must be some hidden unity. And yet equally important, it seems like, well, there must be some force of division, because like there's different stuff, like the world is full of separate objects, and just like if everything was all if everything was all the same substance, then there would be no differentiation, and you couldn't have a world like the one we live in. So you just you run into this kind of like fundamental problem in all sorts of places in philosophy. And Taoism was like even more entranced with this than most philosophies, and developed this whole kind of theory of, I guess, the origin of the universe slash like the ongoing dynamics of the world and of the mind and of the relation of the body and mind, that is based around this idea of Taiji. So I'm going to read a quote here that I just pulled off the Wikipedia page, but I really liked it, talking about how there's like this essence of monism that they call wuji, and then there's this like essence of duality called Taiji. And it's like wuji is the original thing, of course, but there must be some dualistic force, and then immediately you've already got a duality, right? It's like, oh, there's a monistic force and there's a dualistic force. So Taoism gets all wrapped up in this, and I'll read the quote. Non-polar, wuji, and yet supreme polarity, taiji. The supreme polarity in activity generates yang, yet at the limit of activity it is still. In stillness it generates yin, yet at the limit of stillness it is also active. Active and stillness alternate. Each is the basis of the other. So this is like talking about like sine and cosine, like acceleration, and if you picture like a simple harmonic oscillator just like moving back and forth here. So if you picture like a simple harmonic oscillator, right, like our little kind of spirit cursor down here, maybe moving back and forth with a kind of sine wave motion, when it comes right to the top of its peak, or maybe you're going up and down, you can picture throwing a ball up in the air. When it comes right to the top, its velocity is zero, right? 'Cause, of course it's zero, because otherwise it would just continue off the screen. But that's also the motion when its change in velocity is the fastest, because it's slowing down and it's beginning to accelerate the other way. And then like the acceleration, I mean, in the gravity case of throwing a ball, the acceleration is constant, but in the kind of sine and cosine case, the acceleration is also changing. And so it's like when it's at the limit of its, it has zero speed, but it's at its limit in terms of position, but it also has like it's back. It's like maximum acceleration, but then it has zero change in acceleration. But then it's at maximum of like the change in the acceleration, um, and so there's this kind of like interplay of opposites that just I don't know. It's like very powerful image to me, and so that's what this quote is getting at. With in stillness, it generates yin. Yet at the limit of stillness, it is also active. Activity and stillness alternate. Each is the basis of the other. He continues to say, in distinguishing yin and yang, two modes are thereby established. The alternation and combination of these generate all the elements: water, fire, wood, metal, earth. With these five elements harmoniously arranged, the four seasons proceed through them, right? The seasons, also like the year, the circle, the cosines, like the tilt of the earth. The five phases are simply yin and yang, or the five, like all the elements are simply yin and yang. Yin and yang are just expressions of the supreme polarity, this like, pull towards separation of the Taiji. Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, that's just sort of like a powerful, like abstract philosophical theme, and you see that reflected in the game all over the place. Of course, here is this like, sort of spiral symmetrical symbol. All of the tiles flipping back and forth, and tons of the art, just kind of reflects this theme of like negative space in the game. So it's everywhere in the puzzles, of course. The flower area, you have like petals that are demanding certain amount of neighbors share their space or have the reverse color of their space. So that like really brings to mind this sort of like John Conway's Game of Life, and like the number of neighbors a square has being a crucial ingredient. It also, all of the puzzles invoke Go, just because you're placing these black and white stones and kind of like filling up the board by placing these tiles. So that brings to mind Go's like complicated rules of, or I mean simple rules, but like complicated patterns of like life and death of different components, and you end up with these very delicately interweaved structures in Go, where like the two players are kind of like locked in a struggle, and the life and death of the components is like very uncertain and intermingled. And similarly in Taiji, in some of the more complex puzzles, there's you end up with like this very detailed interlocking of shapes, just like in an advanced game of Go, where you're seeing, each you have to kind of constantly flip back and forth between treating the pieces as positive space or as negative space. So one nice example of this is this like octagon symbol that comes up if we walk inside this like awesome art museum in the game. We have the statue of the main character, sort of like lovely lady with these four seraphim wings, and then above her you see there's an octagon shaped chandelier, because those are like the two tiles superimposed, right? The black tiles and the white tiles come together, like a union of opposites, and that same octagon pattern, of course, shows up in the witness, in the mangrove tree houses area. I think bearing that same symbolism of like the two squares over, because of course in the witness, the little octagon star patterns, you have to group them in pairs of two. So that's symbolizing like those, the tiles being united. And that same pattern shows up in Taiji, not just here, but also at the very beginning of the game, which we can superimpose. The player is kind of like originates in this octagonal form. I really love this art museum section where they have a bunch of like precise pixel art. It feels like a little bit out of tone with the rest of the game, but it's very fun. It's sort of like the town in The Witness, where you have like a combination of all these different mechanics, and you have to kind of decipher them, and nothing makes sense early on when you haven't learned the mechanics yet. So anyways, there's just a lot of heart put into this game. So this northernmost area of the game has some interesting symbolism. Some of the symbolism of the game is just, I'm sure there's a lot of thought behind all the areas, but just like with The Witness, I'm like, some I have a better grasp of than others. Um, so so we have this fun sort of like binary, like ones and zeros, which of course is another like reflection of duality, just like foreground and background, and life and death, and like being and non-being, and all the other shapes that we get, and black and white. So here, again, imitating the witness, right? You have that mountain. This is at the very top of the map where everything becomes sort of black and white colored, to give it that kind of like somber spiritual vibe, thanks to the snow and then the dark colored rock. And we have all these binary numbers, and the binaries like merge, which is more kind of dualistic fun. And of course the cemetery theme is like just representing death, right? So this is like the life and death theme coming through here. And I think one interesting thing here, just like I love my theories of the river and the witness symbolizing magic and coming from the mountain and flowing out to the sea and stuff, here we have a different water symbolism, where up here in this like frosty, cold cemetery, there's all this snow and ice, right? And the frozen water is like, it's like represents death. But then it's melting up here, and the river just first starts here, pours out from the cemetery, which is interesting. It's like the generation, the glacier, the thing that's like giving life, is actually death. And then it's like turning into this life. And that runs through and like provides life for the whole island. So just kind of a reflection of some of the environmental storytelling, or sort of thematic storytelling that happens in this game as the river flows through and creates this beautiful kind of like Chinese garden. So the river runs down into this like beautiful lily pad zone, with these Chinese pagoda architecture, of course the pagoda architecture, and like Chinese style harkening back to the Taoist themes that are at the heart of this game. And this whole area where the river pours in becomes, just like Go, a kind of like interplay of life and death, where you have all these little peninsulas and things that are playing with like land and sea. And then over on our left here, there's a similar interplay of like above ground and underground, right? Just like kind of like a reference to the marsh area of the witness, where you learn about tiles that have to be colored in. Go hover over some of those tiles there. Here we have, so like earlier you learn that like these solid tiles have to be like represented as as a square, and then you get these empty tiles exactly like in the witness, but with a little bit of a twist, because these aren't like tetromino shapes, they're quantities, but the empty tiles are like subtracting away, and so that area happens in this in this underground section of the map, and you have like these funny kind of caves that are giving you a little preview of the hidden spot, and I don't know, continuing that interplay. Yeah, so then the water comes through that kind of like garden interplay, like Taiji zone of like logical on and off, black and white, land and sea, and flows down past, a little bridge right past the starting area, and I don't know, plus some really nice trees, but then kind of water falls off, because of course it's like floating island, I guess, so it goes off the edge of the map, except wait, we can follow the waterfall still further. To that tree over there. So we have a face in the rocks here, and there's a bunch of kind of like tricky little artwork like that, I think, which is a nice reference to this sort of like periodelia of the witness, and always trying to read details into the environment and things. But then even more so, if we, I think, do we have to go around this way or the other way?
I think you're right.
So going right around here, the waterfall goes in, and any fan of the witness will be familiar with this shape, so we get a great reference to the environmental puzzles in the witness, and then flows into this kind of like piping structure, and we get a little bit flowing out, of course, because you got to have some nice waterfalls in a game. Um, but this zone is like, it's like, what is this? This is like mechanical stuff. If you look at it closely, this is actually a water treatment plant, right? So you have all this gnarly. This is like a sewage plant. Big contrast to the like beautiful Chinese garden that we saw earlier, right? This is like not kind of a pleasant. Everything's rusted. There's like literally like, I mean, that's a bucket of sewage. And this is a bucket of like slightly cleaner, only somewhat sewagey water, right? Why is one of the puzzle areas in this beautiful game a sewage treatment plant, right? The reason is because this too is a symbol of like rebirth, right? This is like the intermingling of life and death because you have all of this waste, and but like it's processed. It goes through all of these pipes and things and all these settling tanks, and it's recycled, and can be pumped back up just like they must be pumping the water in the mountain of the witness, pump back up to continue the cycle, and it can give birth again to those like pristine, like Japanese water gardens and lilies and things. So this is like one of the many symbols in the game of renewal and rebirth. And in the ending of the game, we see the water, the flowing water is reversed, so it's like going backwards in time. It's like getting the waterfall animation is playing backwards and getting sucked up into the reservoirs, and all the waves are going backwards. There's another kind of symbol of like this duality, and the water as a symbol of rebirth. So that's all for like the big picture kind of like ways that duality is reflected in the game. I mean, of course, it's in myriad different places and it's throughout all the game mechanics. But there's also just a bunch of like nice little, very like witnessy touches, kind of like I see what you did there type moments. So in this sort of funny, I guess it's like a mine or something, where you're learning about taking paths, much like the suns in the Witness mangroves area. You have these like wacky towers that have been built up, these like vertical kind of like bayou shack dwellings in this like tailings pit, which I don't really know what the backstory is on that, but you have these multi-story towers, and each one, like this one has like a 3x3 puzzle, and then there's 5 different iterations. Taiji, of course, unlike the Witness, can use the magic of 3D perspective to put like monitors everywhere, and then you step up close to the monitor and it takes up your entire screen. But Taiji, since it's a 2D game, cannot like hide the monitors using the magic of perspective. They have to actually take up like a good physical amount of space on the screen, and so it has this system of using the same flat space in order to display multiple puzzles by running over this sequence, and thereby it can do that same thing that the Witness does, where it has like long sequences of like short and sweet puzzles, in order to like communicate key basic themes. So you run across here, it's got 5 puzzles of 3x3 configuration, and then you activate those panels and you run upstairs, and then this is, it ought to be 4, but then you have 3 puzzles. You get a 4x4 configuration, so you've gone up a level, and then you've also gained a level of puzzle width, but the building itself has become smaller. And then you go up yet again, and now we have just 2 as opposed to 3, but we've gone up to 5x5 puzzle width at the top of this tower, and now the painting takes up the entirety of the tower. So there's just a lot of really cute moments in Taiji akin to that. There's also a bunch of very deliberate Witness references in the games. Of course, you got the pink trees. You have this beautiful red temple. I mean, red temples aren't that rare in Chinese architecture, but it has kind of a similar place as the monastery in the Witness. You have you have symmetry area like in the Witness. There's quite thoughtful color symbolism in the game. So of course you have black and white as sort of like the fundamental, representing this duality of opposites, and as it is a fundamental sign in the Witness. Then you have a sort of yellowish color that's often kind of like a tutorial, like this is the main path. Symbolism, just like in the Witness castle area where the tutorial panels and many of the interconnects are yellow. Then you have the yellow and blue combination in the symmetry zone. So in the symmetry zone, you have the same, you know, uh, uh, yellow and blue colors coming straight from the Symmetry Island in the Witness, and these kind of ancient ruins referencing the geometry reflection area in the desert of the Witness. In contrast to yellow, which is used to represent like the kind of completion of areas and shows up in the main center zone when you unlock each spot. You have red wires are kind of sure indicator of like a side optional like higher difficulty area, and they also like red icons in the puzzles are kind of associated with like this is a tough issue to deal with. So here we see in this beginning area how you get all of the areas lighting up in that kind of yellow completionist color. So it's adopting a lot of the same color symbolism of the Witness, putting its own twist on things. So you also have negative color symbolism with this kind of purple and yellow interplay that's introduced with these flower petal items where the number of patterns that they want to have or the number of adjacent neighbors they want to have is they want to be the same color as their number of yellow leaves, so that the single yellow leaf will want to have not one neighbor. All purple leaves is like has to be the reverse of all of its neighboring colors. So you get a lot of nice color symbolism in Taiji. Alright, so now it's time for a extra spoiler alert because we're going to talk about stuff from the ending of the game. If you're partway through Taiji, you can get out now. This video is still going to be waiting for you when you come back. Give you a moment to do that. Spoilers start now. So another aspect, just like with water and renewal, there's all of these images. This is like in a kind of like secret bonus area in the game, sort of like the blooper cave in the Witness. Except the blooper cave in the Witness is kind of lame. Versus this is like one of the most. It's like where they put all the super big difficult puzzles. So there's all of these images of faces here, and this is because this is like that foreground background. I mean, first of all, like having the puzzle images in the space where the brain of the person is kind of relating it to like just the fact that it's a thinky puzzle game, but also themes of consciousness and thought and contemplation. But you also have all these the faces are like the famous illusion of the vase that has the two faces in silhouette. Up here you have something that's much like that with the kind of two faces in brown looking in together on an expanding puzzle area, and so this whole area is covered in kind of like different silhouettes, and this is doing that like foreground background inversion that you get in the classic illusion, which is the exact foreground background illusion that you're thinking about constantly when puzzling out the different areas in Taiji. And there's also like, see right up there you have that black and white blocks early on in the intro of the game. So right at the beginning, the game is teaching you, to enter the tiles, and it's teaching you to sometimes look for cues in the environment. But then, it quickly starts to teach you like, well, the black tiles are just as substantive as the white ones, and there's the negative space here is just as important as the positive space. And we see that, of course, also artistically in you have these many references where the overall shape of of the level is mimicking the puzzle solution, or is mimicking the themes of that area. So here we have this kind of like four-way L shape, and then we see the same four-way L here, the white L and then black. And again, like this is like a vertical wall, or but then the stairs are at an angle. So there's this kind of confusion of flatness and of foreground background inversion. Um, so that's another way that just Taiji and the themes of duality are reflected in the game. So there's two endings to the game. I'm really only going to talk about the main one. There's a secondary sort of like secreter ending, where the island gets kind of like randomly populated, like all the people come back to the island, which doesn't really make any sense in the context of Taiji, but I feel like is a nice nod to the witness, and like the statues being all over the island is like the statues coming back to life. But I don't know. Even though I feel bad for not having a super definitive analysis of the endings, because they're like where some of the biggest like thematic narrative content of Taiji is. But that's just where I'm at right now. But one thing that I really loved about the Secreter ending is that it requires you to do this very witnessy thing where you have to realize that all of the different areas in the game are actually architected in a way that there's like a gigantic hidden super puzzle, like hidden in plain sight, just like the environmental puzzles in The Witness. So in this area, with the pink trees, you're looking and comparing the lengths of the branches, and using that to kind of fill out a map of like the longer and shorter branches on each tree, and then you realize that the whole area is built also like a kind of binary branching tree that has these branches of different lengths and everything. So each area has its own spin on that, and it's very fun. So that's a really great kind of treat that is a nod to that like amazing witness moment that everyone remembers when they first get their environmental puzzle, when you realize like, wait a second, these symbols that I've been seeing on the panels are like out and about in the world. But I'm mainly going to go through and we're going to talk about the main ending of the game, which happens when you are able to complete. You only need to complete a subset of like 7 of the 10 areas or something like that, or 6 of the 9, or however it is. Then you enter this kind of like spirit realm where you have these other spirits. These are the people that become the villagers on the islands as freed. So you're in this even more abstract and even more floating in space than usual spot. You go through a really wonderful sequence of puzzles where the game asks you to design puzzles basically by, of course you're not really designing them, but you're taking symbols. Previously you've been flipping panels between black and white in order to satisfy the symbols that exist. But of course, in the final expression of like duality and reversal and foreground background inversion, now the black and white tiles that have been the game mechanic are now the game board, and the symbols that you've been learning about and operating as constraints are now like your moving pieces that you're moving around in order to satisfy the constraints. So you go around, and I think another telling thing about this is, for this ending, you just have to go through and master all of the logic puzzles and actually solve some quite like intense, clever logic puzzles. And whereas for the other ending, you have to notice all the environmental things, all the kind of overlooked details. So just like, duality wherever you look in Taiji. And then finally you get to this like amazing concluding images of just like the witness on the mountain, where you have the arches and the overlapping black and white intertwined. Here you have this tree. It's like a Go tree or a Taiji tree, drawing this kind of like Yin-Yang shape of like total overlapping and duality, and the way all these branches are splitting, and you have this symmetry of um, the roots and the branches and everything. So just kind of really, again, there's not like super specific. It's not like, oh well, the black tree represents like science and that sort of thing. In the way that the witness has more specific kind of thematic ideas, but Taiji just has this like really wonderful, entrancing vibe. This tree also brings to mind for me a really amazing experience that I had visiting these bristlecone pines out in like the deserts of Nevada and sort of like eastern desert California, where these are the trees that are some of the oldest of them are some of the most ancient creatures on earth that are still living, but they're still living only in the sense that like an advanced stage of a go game is alive, because the trees themselves, like they're like 7,000 years old, and the trees have, there's like living and dead wood intermingled, just like in this image where you have like living bits growing over and sort of like locked in this game through centuries, just like in Go, of like the living wood using the old dead wood as a scaffolding, and kind of like life bursting through in these unexpected places, and like you're picturing the conduction of like sap and water and nutrients, and how it's like navigating around itself and like reforming the tree, but somehow it's like still the same organism. It's like, wow, how is this like been the same thing over 7,000 years? It's been like growing through itself and readapting, and like the intermingledness of life and death in these like ancient trees is just like totally remarkable. It's like so different from like a really old whale or an old Galapagos tortoise or something. I'm like, that's just an old creature. But these these bristlecone pine trees really spoke to me in a way that this image brings back to mind. But anyway, so we get to the we've completed all these puzzles and stuff, and we activate the final grid, and then now we have this grid that's like over the universe or something. Like space has become a grid. There's this like black hole, this kind of like horrible destruction. It's like, oh, what have we done? I thought I was in this heaven realm, but actually, it's become this kind of scary and very rare thing, namely a Starseed Pilgrim reference. I don't know if this is an intentional Starseed Pilgrim reference, but I really hope it is. And how could it not be? Because you have this Starseed Pilgrim is also this like duality thinky puzzle game where you're learning the rules of the different mechanics, and you have like void world versus like positive worlds, and has the same visual aspect of the kind of like the void space coming and consuming all of the land that you've built. So you go to this kind of like heaven realm, and then go into this like space, and of course the space is just pure black and white. So we just have um, all these stars. Um, it's like totally abstract space, right? Just like the beginning of the universe, and like the first, like the birth of all of the opposites, right? Like the little points of light that are separating themselves from the darkness. Then your cursor goes in there. You get the little lights lighting up because those are all the areas you completed, I think. And your cursor becomes the sun, against space. I know I'm just narrating this. Like I said, I have kind of a fuzzy idea of what the ending is. It's kind of just like beautiful imagery, and like striking imagery. That becomes this sunset on Earth. It's like the generation of the universe, kind of like Mount Fuji, or some beautiful mountain there. And then of course we get more foreground background inversion, right? So we're looking through a window, and then there's a pendulum swinging outside the window, but then I think the pendulum comes to a rest, and now the pendulum is inside the window, except the window is into a cage where our character is trapped, and we're set free from that, and then I guess can go on our way. So it's very kind of like mysterious, surreal ending. And I would love you guys' input into what you think all the symbolism is. Obviously, the symbolism of like kind of liberation and enlightenment, just like in The Witness and Braid. And you have all these foreground background inversions, like the players recontextualizing themselves and things like that. So at any rate, that is Taiji. It is a very fun game. As you can see, it was advised by many of the thinky puzzle game greats, including Jonathan Blow himself, but also a bunch of other sort of like great designers and people who've been involved in some really cool stuff. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed Taiji. If you somehow managed to watch this entire video first without playing the game, then I would urge you to play the game, because it is mostly about the puzzles and the richness of the mechanics, and that's where it really like kind of comes out strong and rivals The Witness itself. Is in the complexity of the puzzles and the way that everything builds on itself is really quite beautiful and has its own distinct feel. So thanks so much for watching. Just as Matthew Vandevander thanks us for playing, and I will see you next week when we will get back to our regularly scheduled Braid and The Witness analysis.